With San Francisco 49ers training camp right around the corner, you already know what that means. That means it's time. It's time for a way too early 53-man roster projection. So we're going to go through, we're going to talk about all the moves that we think the 49ers will make, but we're going to find out if the 49ers actually cut the same roster or field the same way. Also some hilarious back and forth going on with social media, all sparked by Brandon Aiyuk calling out the entire 49ers defense. We're going to get into it all right after this. So make sure you smash that like button and let's cook. Drop a SDS in the chat. Let's go. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Love to see it. What is going down, SDS squad? You already know, home of the Bread Gang, home of the San Francisco 49ers as we get prepared for 49ers training camp. You can see we're ready to go. It's our third live of the day. This one is going to be jam-packed with a ton of information about the entire roster. We're going through every position group. We're going to talk about damn near all 90 players on the roster, and we are going to project our first 53-man roster. Obviously, way too early because we need to get through training camp. We need to get through preseason before we can really figure out what's going down with the roster. But of course, it's never too early for a roster projection. Before we get into the roster projection, and get into all that good stuff. Obviously, jam-packed day right now with the San Francisco 49ers as players are getting prepared for training camp. A specific player that we know very well, San Francisco 49ers Brandon Aiyuk, today just called out the entire 49ers defense on Instagram. This is how you know football is back. Training camp is here. 49ers players basically raining down on Santa Clara for training camp. And if this doesn't get you excited for San Francisco 49ers football, I don't know what else will. Brandon Aiyuk told the 49ers defense today on social media that if you're basically wearing a white jersey, oh boy, you better have your head on a swivel. I love it, man. Brandon Aiyuk said, and if you got a white jersey on this week, it's FU. I'm here for this. This to me feels like peak football time. You know what I'm talking about? Like, so I think, fans will typically believe, one team, you all wear 49ers logos, all that good stuff. But in all honesty, starting in college, it's you're kind of separate from each other, offense versus defense. I mean, all your offensive meetings go on, and you're always interacting with your offensive teammates, but the defense is doing the same thing. They're going through their defensive meetings. They're with their defensive teammates. You guys come together for practice. Obviously, the 49ers do a phenomenal job of integrating the entire locker room together. But there is a bit of an instance where it does become offense versus defense. And when you get into training camp mode, of course, you can see Brandon Aiyuk wearing the red jerseys. Well, guess who's wearing the white jerseys? The defense. And BA is ready to cook. As you guys know, Brandon Aiyuk went crazy last year at training camp, absolutely balled out. Not only that, got into a little scuffle, one of the best football fights I've ever seen last year with Fred Warner. The entire situation was fantastic. Well, guess what? Brandon Aiyuk's ready. he's ready to go. And he called out the entire 49ers defense. It's also hilarious because you already have 49ers defenders reacting to it. You have Drake Jackson saying that's a little harsh with the laughing emoji. You also have Diamador Lenore saying red jerseys ain't on none. These guys are ready to go. This is pretty much how I feel. I feel like future right now. Just feeling absolutely sensational with the way everything's playing out. The fact that these players are chirping each other back and forth. Again, it's just another example of 49ers football being back. It's been a long time coming, man. We have been waiting for some time. You also got Diamador Lenore talking about, I got a white jersey with like the Pinocchio emoji. Boy, these boys are ready to go. I'm excited for it, man. It's going to be a lot of fun. But so I didn't. I just want to talk about that a little bit because that really got my juices flowing for 49ers training camp. Again, like training camp is to come out and compete. It's to come out and fine tune everything that you've been working for all summer, and now you get an opportunity to come out and do it. But right now, what I think it's time to focus on is our 53-man roster projection, and we're going to get into it all right now. I'm going to start with special teams because I really don't think there's going to be too much of a surprise here with the special teams. However, you do have a kicker battle heading into training camp, so maybe I eat my words later on, but I don't think it's going to be too much of a surprise. Um, who's going to win this particular job? Jedi already knows. We're doing quarterbacks last. We're going special teams, defense, offense, and ending with the quarterbacks. But obviously, when it comes to special teams, we have three players locking down their special teams positions in a massive, shocking move. Jake Moody, the third round draft pick out of Michigan, beats out Zane Gonzalez, who the San Francisco 49ers traded for during the offseason. Jake Moody wins the kicker battle. He becomes the starting kicker for the foreseeable future. Jake Moody wins the first kicker battle of our 53-man roster projection. Mitch Wishnowsky, of course, the punter, and Tabor Pepper, the long snapper. So for special teams, I have them having three. So that's where our first number begins. So out of the 53-man spots on an active roster, three are accounted for. So right now, out of offense and defense, we have 50 spots. We have 50 spots to allocate. And let's take that and go right into the safety position. Right now, currently on the 90-man roster for the San Francisco 49ers, they have Talanoa Hufanga, Tashawn Gibson, Jair Brown, George Odom, Miles Hartsfield, who they signed in free agency, Taylor Hawkins, undrafted free agent from last year, Avery Young, new undrafted free agent from this year out of Rutgers. So this is how I have it playing out. For the 49ers safety spots, I believe the San Francisco 49ers will carry four safeties. They did this last year. It's an even number. And you've got two strong safeties, two free safeties, and you kind of move forward in that light. So the four safeties that I have making the roster are going to be Talanoa Hufanga, Tashawn Gibson, Jair Brown, and George Odom. No real surprise there. Of course, George Odom, special teams ace. He's done a phenomenal job in special teams last year and throughout his career. Gibson had 5 interceptions last year. Talanoa Hufanga, all pro first team Jair Brown, third-round draft pick. 49ers traded up to get him. I don't think there's really much of a surprise there. Obviously, Miles Hartsfield, who followed Steve Wilkes over from the Panthers. The 49ers signed him to, I think, a modest one-year deal. I would imagine Hartsfield would be a prime candidate for practice squad, along with Taylor Hawkins and Avery Young. I like Taylor Hawkins. I think he has some potential in this league. Again, I just think the 49ers are keeping 4 safeties. So really not a big surprise there. So, and also, if you disagree with my projections, feel free to let me know in the chat who you would have in over the guys that I pick, et cetera, et cetera. I want to hear from you guys. You feel free to scream at me and yell at me about my way too early 53-man roster projection. For cornerback, I have the 49ers keeping 6 cornerbacks. Also, too, feel free to let me know who you guys think are going to be rostered when I get to each position as well. So I'm going to go through all the current cornerbacks right now on the roster, starting with Mooney Ward, Diamador Lenore, Isaiah Oliver, Darrell Luter Jr., Samuel Womack, Ambry Thomas, Deshaun Jameson, AJ Parker, Quantrez Knight. Quantrez is he could play nickel, he can play safety. I like Quantrez Knight, I'm not gonna lie. And Trey Swilling. So the 49ers have a good amount of cornerbacks on the roster. And I don't think it's too much of a surprise that Charvarius Ward, Diamador Lenore, and Isaiah Oliver are going to be locks to make this team. So there's 3. So that means there's only 3 spots left. And we do know that the San Francisco 49ers spent a 5th-round draft pick on Darrell Luter Jr. So all things considered, there's probably a really good shot that Darrell Luter is going to make this roster out of South Alabama. So there's 4. So I got the rookie making it. He's currently on the PUP, but again, they can activate him at any time. He still counts against the 90. I expect Darrell Luter to be on this roster moving forward. Another guy that I expect to be on this roster, Samuel Womack. Samuel Womack did a really good job last year out of the nickel. It really was looking like prior to the signing of Gibson and prior to the injury that forced Jimmy Ward into the slot, it looked like Samuel Womack was going to play a lot of snaps for the San Francisco 49ers. But he still played a lot last year. He excelled on special teams. I do think Samuel Womack is absolutely a lock to make this roster. But that's 5. So right now I got 5 cornerbacks. Charvarius Ward, Diamador Lenore, Isaiah Oliver, Darrell Luter, Samuel Womack. That leaves 1 spot left for this roster to work. And the remaining guys that we have to pick from, Trey Swilling, Quantrez Knight, Ambry Thomas, AJ Parker, Deshaun Jameson. So this is where we kind of run into our first potentially controversial roster projection. Again, I am more likely than not going to be completely wrong here, but based on what I have seen from the past 2 training camps, last year I thought was a big opportunity for Ambry Thomas to take steps forward. I think he regressed. I did think he took steps back, especially in training camp. We didn't even see him throughout the regular season, and that was with, theoretically losing 2 starting cornerbacks. You lost Emmanuel Mosley. We were supposed to be getting back Jason Verrett at one point in the season, but that unfortunately never happened because he re-injured himself prior to his first game back. So seemed like Ambry had an opportunity, but I'm not sure. Ambry's firmly on the bubble for me. And because of that, and because of this particular player, I think also surprising and being able to play multiple roles, whether on special teams or in a pinch at cornerback, I have in a bit of a surprise Deshaun Jameson making the roster, being the sixth cornerback, edging out Ambry Thomas, AJ Parker, Quantrez Knight, Trey Swilling. Again, I like Quantrez Knight. I think Quantrez Knight has an opportunity to take massive steps forward, and maybe Quantrez could even edge out Ambry and Jameson. But I think you can see the speed that Jameson provides, the return ability that he can also add. I right now have Deshaun Jameson as the sixth cornerback to make the roster. So recap: to cut Ambry, AJ Parker, Quantrez, Trey Swilling. Obviously, if you can get Ambry back on the practice squad, Quantrez Knight back on the practice squad, that's a good position to be in. But now it's starting to ramp up. I agree. I think Quantrez definitely got that dog in him. He's a guy that he's just got to wait for his opportunity. I think Quantrez, when he gets his opportunity, is going to make the most of it. But right now, I don't see the path unless he takes massive strides, which is possible heading into this camp. But that's why I can't wait to get into camp and we see what we see. Now, this one is extremely difficult, the linebackers, because I have the 49ers only rostering 5 linebackers. So this one was already kind of stressing me out a little bit. Already kind of stressed by the decisions that have to be made at linebacker because I see 6, 7, even 8 guys that have absolute potential to be on a roster. And it's very difficult. I'm going to list out all the linebackers that I have, and you feel free to drop the 5 that you have because after doing all these numbers, there's only 5 that I could fit. It's either 5 linebackers, 6 cornerbacks, or 5 cornerbacks and 6 linebackers. I went heavy on DB just because of the issues that we've had at depth. So I went heavy DB. But that could be a slight change that they make from a numbers perspective. But these are the linebackers: Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Oren Burks, D. Winters, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, Jalen Graham, Curtis Robinson, Marcelino McCrary-Ball. There's a lot of really good linebackers here. Obviously, we can mark Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw off the list. Those guys are locks. There's not even a question about it. Those guys are making the roster. For what it's worth, just right now, Ian Rappaport is reporting that the Raiders have signed former Ravens Pro Bowl cornerback Marcus Peters. So Marcus Peters will be joining the Raiders. That means the 49ers will be seeing Marcus Peters in about a month or so. So, little squirrel. Okay, back. I'm back. So Oren Burks to me right now is your leader in the clubhouse to replace Azeez Al-Shaair. He's the guy who has the most experience. He's done it before, and he's done a really good job at it. I think Oren Burks right now is your leader to kind of take over that Azeez Al-Shaair role. But I also think there is someone that can challenge him. And so right now, that's 3 linebackers. I think when you look at D. Winters and you look at what he did in college and you look at how fast he is and you look at the instincts that he possesses, and you also, of course, look at the 5th-round draft. I think it's the 6th-round draft capital that the 49ers put into him. I think D. Winters definitely has a shot to steal a roster spot. So that's 4. That means there's 1 spot remaining between Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, Jalen Graham, Curtis Robinson, Marcelino McCrary-Ball. That's why this particular exercise, I do not fault or envy whichever person inside the San Francisco 49ers organization is making these cuts, because this is a hard one. So I had to throw in a trade because I think these guys are just too talented. So we have our first trade, and it pains me. It pains me so much to say this, because I think this guy is great. We had him on the channel earlier. It hurts to say this, and I hope he plays well enough to prove me wrong, earn a roster spot. But I feel like Flan DFF is a quality player that another team would be willing to send the 49ers. Again, you look across the league, there's a lot of there's 3 GMs, there's 3 head coaches who've had experience with Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles. I wouldn't be surprised if someone would send maybe a 6th rounder for DFF for his phenomenal special team skills, but also his ability to be a spot starter. So it hurts. It hurts my heart. But in my way too early 53-man roster projection and the 49ers only keeping 5 linebackers, I have traded Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, ideally for a 6th rounder. Hurts. It hurts. Hurts the soul. Because I love DFF, man. Flan is a legend. He's been great for the 49ers, but they have a log jam. They have a log jam at the position. And if they can get some value for someone, again, like DFF has done it before, he re-signed on a 1-year deal. Maybe a team suffers an injury or something like that, and they see DFF as a guy who could fit right in with the experience that he has. That's why I have him as the potential trade candidate. But that leaves it up to who makes the roster. Who's the 5th guy that takes a hold of that spot? Because last year, Curtis Robinson made the active roster, and a bit of a surprise. Curtis Robinson made the active roster, immediately went to IR, and then they cut him later and brought him back to the practice squad. But you also have Jalen Graham, the 7th-round draft pick out of Purdue. So, and of course, Marcelino McCrary-Ball. So it's a very, very difficult decision. But I have the 5th linebacker to make the roster to be Marcelino McCrary-Ball. I think McCrary-Ball has one of the opportunities to be one of the biggest risers from year 1 to year 2, the undrafted free agent last season, who was had a great camp, great preseason. Unfortunately, didn't make the cut, but spent all last year on the practice squad. I have Marcelino McCrary-Ball taking that next step and making the roster. And again, putting the 49ers in a really, really tough position. Really tough position. So that's my first. That was a tough one. It really was, because I wanted to keep 6. I wanted to keep 6 linebackers, but the numbers just weren't working out. So I kept 5: Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Oren Burks, D. Winters, Marcelino McCrary Ball with a trade of Demetrius Flanagan Fowles. 49ers cut 7th-round draft pick Jalen Graham and Curtis Robinson, who made the roster last year. Again, I do not envy anyone who has to make these decisions because it's very difficult. With the 49ers defensive line, the deepest group right now on the entire 49ers roster. This one was also difficult because I could only keep 10 defensive linemen. And I went back and forth with a couple of guys, but this is the entire list of the defensive linemen currently on the roster, counting against the 90-man. Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, Javon Kinlaw, Kevin Givens, Drake Jackson, Robert Beal, Cleveland Ferrell, T.Y. McGill, Kalia Davis, Kerry Hyder Jr., Austin Bryant, Daryl Johnson, Alex Barrett, Marlon Davidson, Spencer Wagee. So, whoo, boy, we have a lot of unknowns with this group, and we have some knowns with this, and plenty of knowns as well. But guys like Kalia Davis make this difficult because we haven't seen him yet. He was pretty much injured the entirety of his rookie year. Is basically a redshirt year. We didn't see a whole lot from him, but I know there are some expectations with what Kalia Davis is going to bring to the table. So the question becomes, does he make it or does someone else? We'll find out. But of course, Nick Bosa makes the roster. Eric Armstead makes the roster. Javon Hargrave. Javon Kinlaw makes it. Kevin Givens makes it. Drake Jackson makes it. Of course, the 5th-round draft pick, Robert Beal, I believe, is also going to make the roster. And Cleveland Ferrell is going to make the roster and has an opportunity to be a guy that will play pretty well. But that's 8. That's 8 guys right now. And that leaves 2 more spots on the defensive line. And who do those spots go to? That's the question, is who is going to make it? Now, when I look at what T.Y. McGill did last year in spot duty, a guy that the 49ers picked up off the streets and played pretty well. I was impressed with T.Y., what he was able to do on the interior. So he's a guy that's heavily in consideration for this spot. Kerry Hyder, heavily consideration. Austin Bryant, edge, like he's more of a edge rusher, like a pass rush specialist who can get after the passer in pass rushing situations. Great first step get off. I mean, the dude almost looks like a wide receiver, just built for it. So I think there are multiple guys in play for this spot. T.Y. McGill, Kalia Davis, Kerry Hyder Jr., Austin Bryant for sure. Alex Barrett has been with the Niners he's been a practice squad legend for a long time. Marlon Davidson is interesting. Spencer Wagee is interesting. But I think with the information that what we have right now, and trying to balance out defensive tackle versus kind of edge players. Right now, we've got Bosa edge, we've got Drake Jackson edge, Robert Beal edge, Cleveland Ferrell edge. Eric Armstead he can play both, so I think he will play both. So he's kind of a half. So they have like 4.5 edge rushers. And then they have Javon Hargrave, Javon Kinlaw, Kevin Givens, and I think Kalia Davis makes it. So I'm going to say Kalia Davis makes it. So that's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5, basically interior defensive linemen. So that last spot could really go up between Kerry Hyder and T.Y. McGill. So the reason why I have to lean this particular player is because he can do both. He can play outside and he can play inside and has had some success doing that. So, right now, until anyone else shows me otherwise, it's really a coin flip right now. Without going through training camp, I could literally flip a coin, but I'm going to land on Kerry Hyder being the guy who is able to edge out and kind of balance out the defense because he can play both outside and inside over T.Y. McGill. But again, this could be something that comes back where we review it at the end when the final roster's cut, and we're like, they ended up going Ty over Kalia or something like that. So right now, my current defensive line for the 49ers would be Bosa, Armstead, Hargrave, Kinlaw, Givens, Jackson, Beal, Furl, Hyder, and Davis. So when you get towards these fringe spots, the fringe spots are where your versatility really matters. You have to have versatility because to be these fringe guys, you got to be able to step in multiple roles to be able to like solidify your spot. So for those keeping track at home, that's 10 defensive linemen, 5 linebackers, 6 cornerbacks, 4 safeties, 3 special teamers. So far, does anyone have any major issues with the defense that I have assembled for your San Francisco 49ers? Again, really hard decisions to be made with the linebackers, really hard decision between how many guys you're keeping versus is it 5 linebackers and 6 cornerbacks or 5 cornerbacks and 6 linebackers? That's something that they could play with. Or do they go, we're going to keep 5 cornerbacks, 5 linebackers, and 11 defensive linemen? So they can absolutely tweak for sure what they're doing. And I'll kind of run through the entire defense as a whole. So this right now is the 25 players that I have the 49ers keeping on defense, starting with defensive line. Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, Javon Kinlaw, Kevin Givens, Drake Jackson, Robert Beal, Cleveland Furl, Kerry Hyder, and Kalia Davis. So 10. That's 10. I won't read the cuts because that's just a bunch. That's a lot of names. With the linebackers, we have Fred Warner, Drake Greenlaw, Oren Burks, D. Winters, Marcelino McCrary Ball. We have our first trade. Demetrius Flanagan Fowles gets traded for a conditional sixth. Again, just out of just having too much talent at the position. And I think Marcelino McCrary Ball just takes an undeniable jump that the 49ers can't deny. They end up cutting 7th round draft pick Jalen Graham and Curtis Robinson. 6 cornerbacks with Charvarius Ward, Diamador Lenore, Isaiah Oliver, Daryl Luter Jr., Samuel Womack, and a surprise make in Deshaun Jameson, who really edged out Ambry Thomas in that scenario. 4 safeties, Talano Fonga, Sean Gibson, Jair Brown, George Odom, to go with the 3 specialists, Jake Moody, Mitch Wishnowsky, and Tabor Pepper. So 25 on defense, 3 on special teams. If the math checks out, that means we have 25 roster spots remaining for offense. So what is it gonna be? What is it gonna be? All right, we're gonna start with the 49ers offensive line. And this is how we're going to do it because this also is a very difficult position for the sheer fact that they only have so many available spots. So it makes it really difficult to build out your depth. So when building out depth, you need guys that have versatility. Again, same thing that got Kerry Hyder on the roster over a guy like T.Y. McGill is a versatility. So that's the same thing we're going to be looking at with offensive line. We know the top five. It's not even up for consideration. It's Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Spencer Burford, Colton McKivitz. That's going to be your starting offensive line, barring any injuries. The hard part is the numbers game. I think the 49ers are only going to have 3 spots available for backups. So to be able to be a backup as an offensive lineman, you best believe you can play multiple positions. So this is how I have it right now. Jonathan Feliciano is your number one backup on this offensive line. He is a starting quality center guard. He could start right now for probably any team in the NFL. So Jonathan Feliciano is a lock to me to make this roster. So obviously he will be the primary backup for both guard spots and the center spot, barring him beating out someone in training camp potentially. So Feliciano becomes my number one priority offensive lineman, but that leaves 2 spots left. And this is the list of guys that we have to pick from for the next 2 spots. Matt Pryor, Jason Poe, Joey Fisher, Jalen Moore, Nick Sikel, Keith Ishmael, Corey Luciano, Il Manning, Leroy Watson, Alfredo Gutierrez. There's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys to pick from 2 spots. And the toughest decisions that I personally had were with Matt Pryor, Jason Poe, Jalen Moore, Nick Zakel, Leroy Watson. Alfredo Gutierrez is a part of the international program. There will be a spot available for him on the roster. It won't be active, but he'll be on the roster. So I'm not worried about Alfredo. He won't make the final 53, but he will be on the practice squad in that kind of international designation roster spot. So Alfredo will be on the practice squad for sure. But the questions become who's your swing tackle and who are your swing offensive linemen? And it's basically who wins. I see it as a 3-way battle right now for swing tackle. It's between Jalen Moore, Matt Pryor, and Leroy Watson. Those are the guys that I think are competing. And then who's competing for the backup center guard role? It's obviously Nick Sikel, Jason Poe, Joey Fisher, Keith Ishmael, Corey Luciano, Manning. So you have 2 segments of depth battles going on. Jonathan Feliciano is your 6th man. Even though he's not your swing tackle, he's your 6th man, in my opinion, on that offensive line. Now you got to determine who your swing tackle is and who your last man on the depth chart is, which makes this really, really difficult. Does Jalen Moore do enough to hold off Matt Pryor, who has previous starting experience in this league? Does Leroy Watson shock a lot of people and become a name that we talk about more as a former undrafted free agent, converted tight end to tackle? Is he a guy who can challenge both Matt Pryor and Jalen Moore? So, again, we've talked about this. 49ers opted to not draft a tackle. They decided that kicker, tight end, safety was where they wanted to go in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. They felt comfortable enough with Jalen Moore, Matt Pryor, Leroy Watson filling in that swing tackle role, potentially being the tackle of the future, I guess. So it really comes down to those 3. Out of those 3, I think it's really gonna again, without being at camp or being at OTAs to really get my eyes on these guys, it's between Jalen Moore and Matt Pryor. Leroy Watson has a shot, but I need to see it for myself. But without seeing it for myself, I got to cancel out Leroy Watson. Without seeing Matt Pryor, it's really hard for me to determine what he currently is. Jalen Moore, I at least know what Jalen Moore is, and I know that Jalen Moore can do it, but he can also be very inconsistent at it. So the biggest thing for Jalen Moore this training camp is to prove that he can be consistent. So I really think it comes down to Jalen Moore or Matt Pryor. As it stands right now, today, without going to training camp, and this could absolutely change, I have Jalen Moore sneaking through one more time. Now, I could see it in the chat. People believe that this could be the end of the road for Jalen Moore, and it could. Former fifth round draft pick out of Central Michigan, I believe it was. Again, has showed promise in on this team. So I think going back to his first spot start in the Colts game, he played pretty well back in 2021, but he's also shown regression. So this is a big training camp for Jalen Moore. Right now, I have him making the roster, but that could change very quickly. So it's not a lock to me, but right now, if I had to do it because it is way too early, it's Jalen Moore. But that is going to be one of the number one things that I'll be watching at training camp. Who's the swing tackle? Who's the next guy up? Is it Jalen Moore? Is it Matt Pryor? Is it Leroy Watson? And that will help us determine. Like I said, I just haven't seen enough of Matt Pryor, Leroy Watson to be able to have them jump Jalen as of yet, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. Big training camp for Jalen Moore. Big training camp for Jalen Moore to earn his roster. They need a swing tackle, and those are the options. The next is the fringe guy. Who's the fringe guy that is going to make the roster that can play multiple positions? Last year, Nick Zakelj made it over Jason Poe. Jason Poe was really starting to sound like a guy that could absolutely make the final roster, but it didn't happen. They ended up keeping Nick Zakelj. Nick Zakelj played primarily guard, and from what we've heard from OTAs, they have him playing center. With Jason Poe, I think he's played primarily guard as well, because if you remember last year, the two main centers were Jake Brendel and Daniel Brunskill. So they were having a competition of who was going to be the starting center. Well, now we know who the starting center is, but we got to figure out who the primary backups are. I think that Ilm Manning, Corey Luciano, and Keith Ishmael will all be practice squad candidates along with Joey Fisher. I think Joey Fisher has a ton of potential. I mean, you've seen his highlights coming out of the D2 college that he played at, Shepherd. Dude looks like a menace. He feels like a perfect guy to learn behind Jonathan Feliciano. They kind of have that nasty streak as an offensive lineman, which is absolutely what you're looking for in offensive linemen. Not all O linemen are just like dogs. Some offensive linemen are, happy-go-lucky, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way of the kind of position mentality breaks out. But I think Joey Fisher matches Feliciano. So Joey Fisher would be good on the practice squad. And again, this is another one where training camp will have a massive impact. So right now I've got Nick Zakelj making it. I think Nick Zakelj, with his guard, center versatility, played tackle in college, of course. But I gotta keep rocking with Nick Zakelj one more time. Again, if there were more spots, this would be a lot easier to build out. But unfortunately, there isn't. So for the 8 offensive linemen, you got the starting 5, and it's basically a battle for depth. My current battle projection for depth of guys who are going to make it are Jonathan Feliciano, Jalen Moore, Nick Sikel. I think Jalen Moore has an asterisk because I think he's going to be in a heavy competition and have to earn his roster spot. Nick Sikel, I think, has a little bit better roster security, but still, Jason Poe is going to be pushing. Joey Fisher is going to be pushing. There's going to be some definite battles for these back end offensive lineman spots. So there's eight. There's eight that we got. And again, big time battle for depth at the O-line position, swing tackle, and the last man to make it. So that's going to be one thing that we're going to be watching for training camp. So this is also going to kind of these numbers that I'm going to put out are going to have a correlation to other roster spots. I think when we look at wide receiver and tight end, those two positions are tied at the hip. Depending on how many wide receivers the 49ers keep is going to impact the tight end position. So those spots are heavily tied to one another. And this is where I've got the 49ers going right now. I have the 49ers repeating last season and keeping 5 roster spots for wide receivers. So only 5 wide receivers make it. And this one is going to be extremely tough because the 49ers they have some really solid back end depth at wide receiver right now. And that's going to make it really difficult to make this decision. But to be honest, I don't think I have to spend a whole lot of time on this one because it's going to be the same 5 as last year. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, Jawan Jennings are locked to make it for me. The only 2 guys that could potentially have their spots taken are Danny Gray and Ray McLeod. Obviously, the 49ers drafted Ronnie Bell in the 7th. Willie Snead played some snaps for the 49ers last year, played in games, but primarily as a practice squad guy. Chris Connolly has real NFL experience as a wide receiver and has found success as a wide receiver in the NFL. So that's going to be a guy that's going to really push on these young wide receivers. Tay Martin is a guy that could absolutely be one of the biggest surprises of training camp. So with Tay Martin, he's one of the guys that I got a gold star on. A guy that I'm going to be watching and paying attention to and really want to see his jump from year 1 to year 2. Tay Martin has got good size. He has the ability to separate off the line of scrimmage. He has really strong hands, and his jumping ability is absolutely phenomenal. Tay Martin, to me, is a bigger bodied wide receiver who can play well in this type of scheme. Whether it's at flanker, whether it's at X, maybe even a little slot. I do think he has some position versatility to him, and he can play on special teams. So Tate Martin is a guy we will be watching. Daz Newsome has some talent as well, and of course, the viral sensation Isaiah Winstead, another big-bodied type guy. So again, 3 locks, 2 guys that are going to be in heavy competition to keep their spots. But I think Danny Gray makes it, and I think Ray McLeod makes it as well. But Ronnie Bell, Willie Snead, Chris Conley, Tay Martin, I think are going to be the guys that are going to be pushing the most for those spots. But again, that's 5 wide receivers. This next position is going to can really change the dynamic of what the 49ers do. The 49ers could keep 6 wide receivers, but if they keep 6, they can only keep 3 tight ends. So I have them, because I have the 49ers keeping 5 wide receivers. Again, they did it last year, remember, and you can bring up players off your practice squad and elevate them at a per game basis up to 2. So there's a world that exists where the 49ers keep 5 wide receivers and they just elevate an additional 6th wide receiver like they did last year. So that's the caveat with the wide receivers. But I do have the 49ers keeping 4 tight ends. And I think right now, my particular take on this might be somewhat controversial just because I think there's a lot of good wide receivers, right? And guys that could absolutely make the roster. But I think the 49ers will find something good enough in both rookie Cameron Latu and Braden Willis that they force themselves onto the roster. I feel like obviously we know Kittle's a lock. It is what it is. Um, but I think the rookies do well enough to earn their spot. So Latu Willis, and remember with Willis, he was a gold star, he was a gold helmet prospect, meaning the 49ers loved him as a prospect, and they were contemplating taking him in the 3rd. They were contemplating taking him in the 5th, and they got him all the way in the 7th. He feels like he has enough physical tools and traits that when he gets into the game or gets into practice, he will be able to wow and he'll be able to prove to Kyle Shanahan that Braden Willis, keep wanting to call him Jordan Willis, but Braden Willis will have a big time shot to make this roster. So I really look at Kittle, Latu, and Willis kind of being your locks. Really, just something about Braden Willis is drawing me to him, where I think he's going to have a pretty solid campaign. But that leaves Dwelly, Fumagalli, and Warner. Now, Fumagalli was in training camp last year with the San Francisco 49ers, along with Dwelly and along with Warner. Obviously, you can see the continuity that the 49ers have created by bringing Warner, Dwelly, and Fumagalli back with the rookies. But I've said this, and I will continue to believe this. I do not believe that Kyle Shanahan will be able to sleep at night knowing he's got rookie tight ends behind George Kittle, and that's it. I just can't see it. I just can't see Kyle and understanding the complexities of his scheme, understanding what is required of these tight ends in a blocking capacity that he'll just be able to sleep at night. There may be a world that exists where they actually do cut all the veterans and they put them on the practice squad and elevate them per game. But again, I think a guy like Warner provides special teams ability. He can definitely play and be an effective blocker in Kyle's scheme. So I think that's what ultimately saves Warner's job is Warner can be trusted as a blocker. He's not the best blocking tight end, but he can be relied on. And because of that ability, I think the 49ers are going to keep 4. They're going to keep 4 tight ends. And they're going to try to bring guys like Ronnie Bell, Tay Martin, Winstead back to the practice squad. They can put veterans on the practice squad like Willie Snead and Chris Conley. And I think they'll be more concerned about losing Latu or Willis potentially. So that's how I got it. That's my rationale behind why the 49ers keep 4 tight ends and 5 wide receivers. I've seen people have it as 6 wide receivers and 3 tight ends. Again, I think the biggest thing is that Willis proves that he's worthy of a roster spot, which puts the whole thing kind of in that conversation of, do you feel confident with 2 rookie tight ends behind George Kittle? And I just right now, until I see it, I would say the answer is no. They're not going to be comfortable with that. So we'll see. So 4 tight ends, 5 wide receivers, and to the running back room. Obviously, got the 49ers keeping 5 running backs slash fullbacks currently on the roster. The 49ers have CMC, Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, Ty Davis Price, Ronald Watt, Jack Coletto, Callan Laybourne, and of course, Kyle Juszczyk. Um, we know Kyle Juszczyk is a lock. We know CMC is a lock. Elijah Mitchell feels like a lock, um, but Jordan Mason is absolutely a lock. We know that for sure. TDP is kind of on that fringe range of another undrafted free agent push for a roster spot again in back-to-back years. Uh, so far, the leader in the clubhouse to do that is Kalen Laybourne, who's really talented, has a phenomenal skill set, and is extremely athletic. His former 5-star prospect, had some off the field issues, had some injury issues, but when on the field at Marshall, he proved he is talented. So the 49ers, I feel pretty confident with the 4 locks of being CMC, Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, Kyle Juszczyk. TDP could be up against it. We'll find out. But TDP's looked good in some of the preseason kind of training leading up to training camp so far, and he's looked pretty good. So TDP has an opportunity to take a step forward, but it really does feel like Laybourne, Watt, TDP battling it out for that final roster spot. So we'll find out. Jack Coletto, again, kind of in that fullback position, kind of do it all kind of guy. He's played quarterback, he's played linebacker, he's played fullback. He feels like he'll be a practice squad guy and be a guy that is in waiting. So Coletto could be a potential Juszczyk replacement, but won't be this year. So 49ers keep 5 running backs and fullbacks. Elijah Mitchell, CMC, Jordan Mason, TDP. I have making it right now without seeing these guys in training camp. And then, of course, Kyle Juszczyk. But the biggest guy that is in danger of losing his spot, I would say, is TDP. All the other guys are locked in, which leaves us to our quarterback room. Last but certainly not least, the San Francisco 49ers ultimately keep 3 quarterbacks. They keep Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold, and Trey Lance. And unfortunately, they cut Brandon Allen. I just don't see enough with the injury sustained to Brock Purdy, the ups and downs of both Sam Darnold and Trey Lance so far throughout their careers. Obviously, Trey is coming back from a season-ending injury himself. I don't feel comfortable with just 2 quarterbacks. And I know there is that 3rd quarterback rule. But I think that's more of a game day rule. They could dress 3 quarterbacks. So typically you can only dress 46 players on game day. This new quarterback rule allows them to dress 3 quarterbacks. So I think they keep 3. Right now, I feel like it's Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold, Trey Lance. I do think Brandon Allen is more than capable of course, being on an active roster. I mean, we know what the word is on Brandon Allen. He was Joe Burrow's primary backup last year. And I do think Brandon Allen is the most like Brock Purdy. I feel like Brandon Allen is, from the little bit I've seen, he looks really similar to Brock in how they operate. They do all the small things really well. Might not be the best athlete, might not have the biggest arm, but they do the small things really, really well. All the things that they can control, they can control. So that's, and I see people saying trade Sam Darnold, and I understand if this is your roster, for sure, of trading, Sam Darnold. But I also look at it in from the standpoint that Kyle Shanahan loves Sam Darnold, and I really do think Kyle Shanahan wants a shot at seeing what Sam Darnold could potentially be with the San Francisco 49ers. I see people saying, it's a $14 million contract. That is I think the overall value of his contract based on playtime incentives. If you look at Sam Darnold's current contract right now, according to Spotrac, it's a 1 year, $4.5 million deal with a $1.5 million signing bonus and 3.5 million guaranteed at signing. That only it carries a dead cap hit of 3.5 million if they were to trade him or cut him, and the current cap hit is at 5 million. So Sam Darnold isn't getting paid 14 million. It's only 14 million if he starts every game for the San Francisco 49ers and is able to hit each incentive. He has 7 million built into his contract in incentives, and he has a per game active bonus, roster bonus of looks like 58,000 per game. So his deal can be worth up to 14 million. It's not. So the way it reads right now is it's a 1 year, 4.5 million. They can definitely have a backup quarterback on a 1 year, $4.5 million contract. Obviously, the incentives come from him being available, and obviously him being active for games triggers more bonuses. So I listen. I don't see Kyle Shanahan trading Sam Darnold. I know it's been discussed as a possibility, but I don't see it because I see a contract worth 4.5 million with a ton in incentives, and those incentives only hit if he plays. So if Brock Purdy, Trey Lance play, you know, I don't know. I don't know if Sam uh, would be traded at that point, considering the 49ers injury history at quarterback. I mean, the 49ers needed 4 quarterbacks last year. Let's not forget about that. Technically, they needed 5. 49ers technically needed 5. So that's why I have them keeping 3. I don't necessarily have them trading Sam Darnold. I don't know who would want to trade for Sam Darnold, barring an injury of some sorts. Um, but I feel like, would you want to trade for Sam Darnold, or would you want to trade for a guy like Trey Lance? Or I don't know. So it's definitely an option. But considering Sam Darnold is only on a 1 year deal, any team that would be trading for him would be trading for essentially a rental player. I mean, it could happen for sure. It could happen. I see Kyle. I see Kyle wanting to play it out a little bit more. But training camp, we're gonna find out. That's why it's gonna be fantastic. That's why there's gonna be so many different things going. Uh, for sure, for sure, playing with training camp. So that brings us to our 53-man roster projection. We have 25 on offense, 25 on defense, and 3 special teamers. Recapping it, we got 3 quarterbacks: Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold, Trey Lance. We've got 5 running backs: CMC, Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, TDP, and Kyle Juszczyk. We got 4 tight ends: Kittle, Latu, Warner, Willis. We have 5 wide receivers: Debo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, Jawan Jennings, Danny Gray, Ray McLeod. 8 offensive linemen: Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Spencer Burford, Colton McKivitz, Jonathan Feliciano, Jalen Moore, Nick Zakel. We have 10 defensive linemen: Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, Javon Kinlaw, Kevin Givens, Drake Jackson, Robert Beal, Cleveland Furl, Kerry Hyder, and Kalia Davis. We have 5 linebackers with 1 trade. We've got Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Oren Burks, D. Winters, Marcelino McCrary Ball, with a projected trade of Demetrius Flanagan Fouls. That one hurt. Don't love it, but again, 49ers just have a lot of talent at linebacker, so they can get something in return for one of these guys. 49ers keep 6 cornerbacks: Charvarius Ward, Diamador Lenore, Isaiah Oliver, Darrell Luter Jr., Samuel Womack, and a surprise make of Deshaun Jameson, who edges out Ambry Thomas. Safeties for Talanoa Hufanga, Tashawn Gibson, Jair Brown, George Odom, and the 3 specialists: Jake Moody, Mitch Wishnowsky, and Tabor Pepper. Whew. All right. We did it. We did it. We made it through the 53-man roster. We projected. We had some trades in there. We had all kinds of stuff. But, man, the 49ers have some tough decisions ahead of them. Big time. Big time. This is not going to be an easy decision for any of the head decision makers in charge, because they are dealing with one of the most stacked rosters we've seen under the Kyle Shanahan era. So there's going to be tough decisions to be made at quarterback, at wide receiver, at O-line, at tight end, at defensive line, linebacker, cornerback. There's hard decisions to be made across this roster, and that's what happens when you do a good job of building a quality roster. You got to make tough cuts. But if the 49ers are somehow able to keep somehow just figure out how to get most of these guys that are cut back on the practice squad, the 49ers will have one of the deepest practice squads in the league, and I'll feel even more comfortable about their current depth. Because again, remember last year, a lot of these guys were rookie undrafted free agents on their practice squad. Now, if you get some second-year former undrafted free agents with a little bit more experience under their belt, it puts the 49ers in an even better position of dealing with depth, and not just 53-man roster depth, but also depth when it comes to their practice squad. And they can have about 16 practice squad players. One of those spots isn't going to count for Alfredo Gutierrez, so he'll be able to have a spot. And then again, you can dress 3 quarterbacks on game day. So yeah, it's tough. My guy says, I feel the pain. I go through this every offseason in Madden. Yeah, it's a hard decision. Like, again, trying to take your emotions out of it, trying to take your fandom out of it and just try to make decisions. It's really difficult. Cap says they better be listening to us, Catch GMs. 100%. 100% they should. Listen to us. We know exactly what we're talking about. We know how to build this roster. No, I'm just kidding. But man, big time. Looking forward to it all, man. I'm just so hyped right now. So jacked up for training camp. Getting to see these guys. I mean, hey, I don't get it right all the time, but we were pretty bullish on Jordan Mason making the roster last year. Got that one right. Who else? Who else were we bullish on? I feel like there weren't a ton of surprises last year for the roster. I think Curtis Robinson surprised the heck out of me when Curtis Robinson made the final roster at linebacker, and then they immediately reverted him to IR. That was a head scratching move, in my opinion. But like they discussed after the fact, they said like we felt he would have got poached by another team, so it was kind of their way of not allowing that to happen. But again, it's going to be interesting to see what ultimately plays out. Zane going to get traded potentially, but that's also another issue. It's like who's in the market to trade for. It would have to be a really similar trade to what the 49ers did to get him, so it'd be a wash. But it'll be very interesting to see. But shout out to all you guys for tapping in. This is the third live of today. It's the third live of today, but I wanted to get in our 53-man roster projection before training camp. So it's on record. It's out there. You heard it. I think the 49ers keep 3 quarterbacks, and Sam Darnold, Trey Lance, Brock Purdy are included. I believe the 49ers keep 4 tight ends and 5 wide receivers. What other things? We get a linebacker trade, and we get a surprise undrafted free agent, Deshaun Jameson, cracking the roster over Ambry Thomas, a 3rd-round pick. So plenty of questionable calls on my part. Could absolutely be wrong on multiple occasions. But that's why we do it. We're having fun with it. So you know what the vibes are. Smash that like button. I know all you are subbing already. Smash the notification bells because we are going to be going crazy. And just so you guys know, you are only allowed to be notified of 3 videos a day for me. So this goes for everyone else on YouTube. So if you've gotten 3 notifications of videos from me, know that you won't be getting any additional notifications from YouTube. That's just how they do it. I post a lot of videos every day, way more than 3. So once I tap you out on 3 video notifications, then you're on your own. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I see a lot of people saying like, "Oh, no notifications, no notifications." It's apparently based on you're only allowed 3 notifications per channel. So I've done because you guys see it all the time. You guys drop into my chat and like, I didn't get a notification. I got a hold of YouTube. I'm like, why don't my people see my notifications? They're like, we only allow 3 notifications per channel per day. And I was like, huh. So if I post more than 3 videos, good luck. You kind of have to stalk the channel a little bit, which I don't mind, which I actually appreciate. So just a heads up, if you've gotten 3 notifications, You've reached your maximum of dealing with notifications from me today. So just something, food for thought. But shout out to all the SDS. We are back. We are back with football. From my understanding, we are going to get we're gonna hear from people tomorrow. So we like that. We like that very much. Love this. Keep stalking. Don't stop. Keep stalking the page because I'm going to be posting as much content as I can. My season has begun. My season starts, and I'm trying to do the best I can to provide you with as much 49ers content as possible. So appreciate you all. Thank you for watching all the videos, liking all the videos, and of course, subbing to the channel. Appreciate y'all. We made it. The off season is over. 49ers football is back. I know a lot of people consider training camp still part of the off season. Not for me. My season starts right now. Let's go. Appreciate you guys. Smash that like button on your way out. Grab a cookie on your way out. Peace. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Love to